This guide covers all the actions that Dark Knight learns from level 51 to 100 in order. We go over how each action is meant to be used and recommend ways to use it when relevant. We also summarize the changes in the combat rotation at level 60, 70, 80 and 90. In the final summary, we outline an optimized opener and explain how it leads into the general rotation alongside 2-minute burst considerations. We also touch on the stat priorities of the Dark Knight. I will assume you already know the basics of Dark Knight at level 50, and if not, you can view my Dark Knight starter guide to get caught up. I will also assume you're acquainted with common abbreviations and concepts such as GCD, oGCD, and weaving, and refer to the shorts and videos in the description on the subject if you need a refresher. Now then, at level 52, you learn the ability Salted Earth, which does a decent amount of damage in the area where you placed it over its duration. Make sure to use it on cooldown, weaving it between your GCDs. To reintroduce and build upon the opener from the starter guide, open with Provoke into Hard Slash, weaving Edge of Darkness and Blood Weapon. Then use Siphon Strike, weaving Salted Earth and Edge of Darkness. Then continue to perform 1-2-3 combos while weaving Edge of Darkness as you are able. We will continue to build on this opener throughout this guide as a way to build a priority order of your cooldowns and resources. It is worth noting, as we build on this opener, that the precise order of all the cooldowns coming out isn't crucially important as long as everything gets used in a timely fashion. Cooldowns like Blood Weapon that take a few GCDs to get spent are more important to prioritize, of course, but overall, whether you use Salted Earth immediately or a GCD later is not going to be a huge problem. Keep this in mind as we progress in this guide. At level 54, you learn the ability Shadow Stride, which zips you to melee range of an enemy. It comes with 2 charges and gains another every 30 seconds, so you can use this quite liberally to close the distance on an enemy whenever you need to. If you use this for pulling enemies, do take note of your healer's position in case they fall too far behind. At level 56, you learn the ability Abyssal Drain, which is an AoE attack that both heals you for each target hit and recovers 600 MP. For your opener, weave it alongside Salted Earth after Siphon Strike, and push your Edge of Darkness to later. When doing large dungeon pulls, it may be beneficial to intentionally delay the use of Abyssal Drain to use for the healing effect when you can benefit more from it. Do make sure to use Abyssal Drain often though. At level 60, you learn the ability Carve and Spit, which is an alternative option to Abyssal Drain as they share cooldown. Carve and Spit is a lot stronger on single target, but only slightly stronger on 2 targets, and does not come with a healing side effect. As such, Abyssal Drain should always be used on 3 or more targets, but consider also using it on 2 targets if the healing it provides might actually be necessary. Since level 50, you have added a few oGCD options to your arsenal. To outline an opener example, pull with Provoke and then use Hard Slash, weaving Edge of Darkness and Blood Weapon. Then use Siphon Strike, weaving Carve and Spit and Salted Earth. And then use Soul Eater, weaving Edge of Darkness. Then continue 1-2-3 combos, weaving Edge of Darkness as you are able. In general, you can follow this priority list of oGCDs, which should align with the opener as well. At level 62, you unlock the Blood Gauge, and both Soul Eater and Stalwart Soul are upgraded to grant 20 Blood Gauge when used, and you can accumulate up to 100 of it. You also learn Blood Spiller, a heavy-hitting weapon skill that spends 50 Blood Gauge. You should use Blood Spiller on up to 3 targets when you have Blood Gauge to use it. Your AoE combo is still superior on 4 or more targets, and in these cases, it is fine to sit on a full gauge and let it go to waste. When using Blood Spiller on AoE like this, make sure to use it on the healthiest target so the enemies go down as closely together as possible. It is worth mentioning that this does indeed lead to a 2-target rotation where you use Unleash, Stalwart Soul and Blood Spiller specifically, and that does seem very backwards, but it is correct. At level 64, you learn the weapon skill Quietus, which functions as the AoE alternative to Blood Spiller, beating it on 3 or more targets. This means you should use Blood Spiller when you can on 1 or 2 targets, and Quietus on 3 or more targets. At level 66, Blood Weapon is upgraded to also grant 10 Blood Gauge whenever it is activated, meaning that it grants a total of 1800 MP and 30 Blood Gauge. This also means that Stalwart Soul and Soul Eater with Blood Weapon grants 30 gauge at a time, so make sure not to overcap. This changes your opener as you can use Blood Spiller after the second Hard Slash for a slight damage gain. At level 68, Blood Weapon permanently upgrades into Delirium, which, in addition to the effects of Blood Weapon, also separately makes your next 3 Blood Spillers or Quietuses free within 15 seconds. These free uses also cause Blood Spiller to grant 200 MP and Quietus 500 MP as a bonus. The main way this changes your opener is that instead of using Siphon Strike and Soul Eater right at the start, you can jump straight to Bloodspiller after Heart Slash. Keep in mind that, as Delirium both generates a combined 30 blood gauge and essentially completely blocks you off from spending blood gauge, you should aim to have at most 70 blood gauge when using Delirium to avoid wasting any. At level 70, you learn the ability The Blackest Night, which is much more commonly known by the acronym TBN, which I will refer to it by for the rest of this guide. On a very short cooldown, it applies a massive shield to the target of your choice, often yourself. It costs just as much as an Edge of Darkness or Flood of Darkness, but if the shield is broken by damage, it grants you Dark Arts, a buff with infinite duration that allows you to cast one of either Edge or Flood of Darkness for free, effectively paying its cost back. From now on, I recommend trying to keep at least 3000 MP available at all times to use TBN, and if Darkseid has plenty of duration left, you should prioritize preventing damage with TBN over dealing damage with Edge and Flood of Darkness. As such, on AoE pulls, TBN should be used on cooldown. On bosses, it can be used on cooldown if you need it, but otherwise it is a lot more common to hold it to reduce a large strike like a tank buster. In a coordinated raid team, you can make use of accumulating a Dark Art stack to bring an extra 3000 MP into a burst window with raid cooldowns up if you wish. This can be difficult, however, and is not expected in regular play. Keep in mind that the shield's size is based on the target's max HP, so if you apply the shield to a player with less max HP, it is more likely to break, returning the MP. Since level 60, the Blood Gauge and Delirium has been introduced, not to mention the Blackest Night, known as simply TBN. For an opener, pull with Provoke and then use Heart Slash weaving Edge of Darkness and Delirium. Then use Bloodspiller weaving Carven Spit and Salted Earth. Then, twice, use Bloodspiller weaving Edge of Darkness. If you have any players with raid buffs to coordinate with, you can also instead lead with Heart Slash weaving Edge of Darkness, Siphon Strike, Soul Eater weaving Delirium, and then followed by all of your cooldowns while spamming Bloodspiller. Remember to try and save 3000 MP just in case you need TBN. At level 74, Edge of Darkness and Flood of Darkness are permanently upgraded to Edge of Shadow and Flood of Shadow, significantly increasing their potencies. Notably, Flood of Shadow is better than Edge of Shadow on 3 or more targets. At level 76, you learn the ability Dark Missionary, which reduces magic damage taken by your party. If you see the boss start casting an attack that sounds like a raid-wide AoE attack, use Dark Missionary. It is often magic. Remember that magic attacks are identified by a purple wand or staff next to their damage number. At level 80, you learn the ability Living Shadow, which summons a very good friend to fight at your side for a while. This should be used on cooldown and should be prioritized over all your other oGCD options if possible. Living Shadow should equally be used on AoE. Since level 70, your MP spenders were upgraded and Living Shadow was added to your arsenal. We will focus on an opener assuming coordinated buffs now, but if you do not have this, you can pull some of the damaging oGCDs closer to the start. Pull with Unmend and then use Heart Slash, weaving Edge of Shadow and Living Shadow. Then use Siphon Strike, Soul Eater and then weave Delirium. Then use Bloodspiller, weaving Salted Earth and Edge of Shadow. Bloodspiller weaving Carven Spit and Edge of Shadow. Another Bloodspiller weaving Edge of Shadow, and then finally one more Bloodspiller. Again, remember to save MP for TBN if you need it. At level 82, you learn the ability Oblation, a decent damage reduction option with 2 charges and a minute cooldown. The main benefit of Oblation is to use it in conjunction with TBN. Oblation can also be good to play for time between other cooldowns. Take note that Oblation can, like TBN, be used on other players as well. It is also a good option to weave alongside other defensives if you need a little extra damage reduction. At level 84, the potency of your 1-2-3 combo is boosted slightly, and Unmend is permanently upgraded to reduce the cooldown of Shadow Stride by 5 seconds whenever it is used. However, none of these things change anything for your rotation. At level 86, you learn the ability Salt and Darkness. When you use Salted Earth, the button is replaced with Salt and Darkness, and it causes the area that Salted Earth covers to burst for massive damage. Naturally, this should be used for every Salted Earth, but in an opener, this takes priority below other oGCDs, unless Salted Earth is about to end, in which case, it should have the highest priority. Due to the power of Salt and Darkness, Salted Earth should be prioritized over Carven Spit in general. Just to be clear, Salted Earth is prioritized highly, but Salt and Darkness is prioritized much lower because it does not affect the cooldown of Salted Earth, as long as it is cast before Salted Earth ends. At level 88, Living Shadow gains a damage boost, making it even stronger. This does not change your rotation. At level 90, you and your Living Shadow learn the ability Shadowbringer. With up to 2 charges and a minute charge time, this attack does a huge amount of damage with an AoE component as a line in front of you like Flood of Shadow. For some reason, it is a requirement that Dark Side, the damage buff from your MP spenders, is active to use this. The first charge should be prioritized over Carve and Spit, but the second one only need to be prioritized over Salt and Darkness, assuming Salted Earth isn't running out. Due to the very long cooldown to generate both charges, you can use these once every 60 seconds in an uncoordinated group, or keep both charges together for a large burst in raid cooldowns with a more coordinated group. Using them together is significantly superior to using them every 60 seconds. Naturally, Living Shadow will use Shadowbringer automatically, so this ability is unchanged. Since level 80, you've gained Salt and Darkness and Shadowbringer to add to your burst arsenal. In your opener, use the first Shadowbringer instead of Carve and Spit and push that to the next window. Then use the second Shadowbringer alongside the fourth Bloodspiller and finish it all with a Hard Slash and Salt and Darkness. At level 92, Shadow Wall is permanently upgraded to Shadowed Vigil, making you take even less damage, and also giving you the Vigilant effect, which heals you either when it runs out or when you drop low on HP. This does not really change how you use it, but the healing does make it more significant to use it regularly. At level 94, Rampart is permanently upgraded to now also increase healing received during it. Your 1-2-3 combo, Stalwart Soul, and Blood Gauge spenders are also upgraded to do more damage. The main thing this changes for your rotation is that the Stalwart Soul combo is now superior on 3 or more targets, rather than 2. At level 96, Delirium gains the effect of turning Quietus into Impalement, and Bloodspiller into the Scarlet Delirium combo of Scarlet Delirium, Comeuppance, Torcleaver. This does mean that it is rather important that you either do the full 3 steps as Scarlet Delirium, or all 3 as Impalement to make the most of the cooldown. At level 98, Reprisal is upgraded to last 15 seconds instead of 10. This does not change how you use it. At level 100, you and your Living Shadow learn the weapon skill Disesteem, which is enabled whenever Living Shadow is used, and replaces the button. Disesteem does amazing damage with an AoE component and should be the first thing you use in a burst whenever possible. To round off, let's first talk about an opener followed by general rotation, as well as how this works with the 2-minute burst. And finally, let's briefly touch on stat priorities on gear. Let's begin. Make sure that Grit is active if you plan to be actively tanking. Then, up to 3 seconds before combat starts, use TBN on the main tank if you expect it to break. Then, 1 second before combat starts, pull with Unmend, even if you're not tanking. And if you intend to use a gem draft, late weave it here. Then use Hard Slash, weaving Edge of Shadow and Living Shadow, Siphon Strike, Soul Eater and weave Delirium. Then use Disesteem, weaving Salted Earth and Edge of Shadow. Then Scarlet Delirium, weaving Shadowbringer and another Edge. Comeuppance, weaving Carve and Spit and Edge. Torcleaver, weaving Shadowbringer and Edge. And finish with Bloodspiller, weaving Salt and Darkness. Note that the final Edge of Shadow relies on TBN breaking properly, and if you will need TBN for something coming up, or prefer to play it safe, you can also skip the Edge of Shadow and instead use Salt and Darkness there. This then leads to the general rotation. Dark Knight's rotation is simply to use the 1-2-3 combo constantly, except when Bloodspiller is available. Bloodspiller can be used whenever you have 50 or more blood gauge, and should be used immediately if your next GCD will bring you over 70 gauge, to avoid Delirium causing you to overcap. Aside from this, you should use all of your damage cooldowns as they come up, with the exception that Shadowbringer can benefit from being used in pairs, and while Living Shadow being used on cooldown will lead to Disesteem being available, holding Disesteem for a few GCDs until raid buffs come up is also beneficial. Note also that Salted Earth's cooldown means it rarely aligns with other cooldowns, but should be used as soon as it is available just the same. If many of your cooldowns are coming up all at once, I recommend this priority list for them. To be clear, the exact order of cooldowns isn't crucially important, although using Delirium and Living Shadow as they are available can be especially impactful. Dark Side up and never being full on MP is also very important, But aside from this, the priority list mainly serves as a guideline for an efficient order to use everything if you aren't sure where to begin. To maximize the damage you can do during the 2-minute burst, it is beneficial to stockpile extra MP. Get as close to full MP as you can without wasting any. Similarly, stockpiling blood gauge can also be great to fit an extra blood spiller during raid buffs. To absolutely maximize your potential burst damage, you can also use TBN aggressively to stockpile dark arts while also getting close to max MP to bring an additional edge of shadow into the burst. After this, the burst is essentially about following the same priority list as before, using your cooldowns as they come up, delaying the second uses of Shadowbringer, and of course Salt and Darkness if it is present. You can use the opener order as a guideline for what to use when, but it is very normal for things to get rearranged a lot, both due to how things pan out throughout a fight, and due to how you will have more or less resources to work with in the 2-minute burst. So don't focus too hard on getting it precisely in the perfect order. It is, however, quite crucial that Living Shadow comes out as early as possible in your burst, as your friend takes a while to perform their attacks from start to finish, and they need the buffs to be active for the whole thing to benefit from them for the whole thing. For AoE adjustments, on 3 or more targets, replace your 1-2-3 combo with your 1-2 AoE combo. Replace Bloodspiller and its Delirium version with Quietus and its Delirium version. Edge of Shadow with Flood of Shadow, and Carbon Spit with Abyssal Drain. All of your other oGCDs should be used as on single target, very aggressively. Finally, regarding stat priorities. Take note that in nearly every single case, item level beats out optimal secondary stats. This means you should always prioritize gear with higher item level, as long as it has strength on it. After that, Dark Knight's stat priority is critical hit, then direct hit, then determination, and finally tenacity. Direct hit and determination are almost identical in value, however, prioritizing whichever one you have less of tends to have a bigger impact on your damage output. As direct hit never occurs naturally on tank gear, they will always be ever so slightly superior to determination to melt with materia. This can in some cases even cause direct hit to be so powerful that it overtakes critical hit in priority under certain circumstances. Skill speed is an interesting stat for Dark Knights. To absolutely maximize your damage, minimal skill speed tends to be most effective. However, Dark Knights work really well with any GCD from 2.5 to 2.4, and the damage difference is small enough that a huge part of the choice can come down to preference. If you are aiming for a specific GCD, prioritize skill speed over direct hit and determination, but below critical hit. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, before Dawntrail, Living Shadow cost 50 blood gauge to activate, which made it a lot more relevant to make sure you had 50 gauge ready for a burst sequence, as the damage was a lot more than just an extra blood spiller.